It was a quiet autumn evening in Seattle when Emma Collins first met her new neighbor. The sun had just disappeared behind the clouds, leaving a golden trace on the wet streets. Emma had spent the last few months rebuilding her life after a painful divorce. She worked at a small art gallery downtown and lived alone in her cozy brick townhouse. Her life was simple: quiet mornings with coffee, evenings filled with books, and weekends spent painting by the window. She told herself she liked the peace, but sometimes, when the rain hit the glass, the silence felt too heavy to bear. That night, as Emma was unpacking groceries, she heard a knock on her door. It startled her because she wasn't expecting anyone. When she opened it, she saw a man standing there with a small basket of bread wrapped in a white towel. He looked about 40, maybe a few years older, with short brown hair and calm blue eyes. His shirt sleeves were rolled up, and there was a kind but uncertain smile on his face. "Hi, I'm Daniel," he said. "Just moved in next door. Thought I'd introduce myself." Emma hesitated for a moment. She hadn't had a real conversation with a stranger in months. But then she smiled. "Oh, welcome to the neighborhood. I'm Emma Collins." He nodded, handing her the basket. "It's just some fresh bread. I bake when I'm nervous, and moving always makes me nervous." That made her laugh, a sound that even surprised her. "Well, it smells amazing. Come in for a minute if you'd like." Daniel stepped inside, glancing around the small but warm living room. The air smelled faintly of vanilla candles, and paintings covered the walls. Soft colors, peaceful scenes. "You paint?" he asked, noticing one half-finished canvas near the window. "Mostly for myself," she said. "It's how I pass time." "I get that," he replied quietly. "Sometimes you just need something to keep you grounded." There was something about his tone, steady but slightly sad, that caught her attention. She didn't ask questions, but she could tell he was carrying something too. For a few minutes they talked easily. He mentioned that he worked remotely as an architect and that he had moved to Seattle for a slower life after years of living in Chicago. Emma shared that she worked at an art gallery near Pike Place Market and that she was still getting used to being on her own again. The conversation felt natural, almost like two old friends catching up after years apart. There was no awkwardness, no forced small talk, just an easy rhythm between two people who didn't expect to find connection that night. After a few minutes, Daniel checked the time. "I should let you get back to your evening," he said. Emma hesitated before replying. "Would you like to come for dinner sometime? It's been a while since I've had company." He smiled, a real one this time, the kind that softened his face. "How about tomorrow night?" "Tomorrow works," she said. When he left, the house felt different. The quiet wasn't heavy anymore. It was expectant. She leaned against the door after closing it, her heart beating faster than it had in a long time. She hadn't meant to invite him. The words had just slipped out. But something about him had felt familiar, almost safe, that night. She stood by the window watching the rain fall, thinking about how strange life could be. A few months ago, she could barely talk about her divorce without feeling like breaking. Now, she was planning dinner with a man she had just met. She told herself it was just a friendly gesture, nothing more. But deep down, she knew it wasn't that simple. There was something about Daniel that pulled her attention. The warmth in his eyes, the way he listened, the calmness in his voice. The next morning, Emma woke up earlier than usual. The air smelled like rain and coffee, and she couldn't stop thinking about her new neighbor. She told herself not to overthink it. It was just dinner, but her heart disagreed. As she got ready for work, she kept catching herself smiling for no reason. Throughout the day, her mind drifted back to last night. The sound of his laugh, the easy way he talked about starting over, the gentleness behind his words. She knew what it was like to start over too, to rebuild your life from the ground up, to wake up in a new place and not know who you are anymore. Maybe that was why she had invited him. Maybe they both understood the same kind of quiet. When she got home that evening, she stood for a long time at her dining table, imagining how tomorrow might go. Should she cook something fancy? Should she keep it simple? She hadn't hosted anyone since before her marriage ended. But then she smiled to herself. It wasn't about impressing him. It was about sharing a moment, one that might remind them both that life still had warmth to offer. That night, she lit a candle and wrote a grocery list. For the first time in years, she felt something she thought she'd lost: anticipation. It wasn't about romance, at least not yet. It was about feeling alive again, about remembering that connection could still exist. Even after everything fell apart, outside the rain came down harder, tapping against the windows like a heartbeat. Emma looked toward Daniel's house, his windows glowing softly through the drizzle. She wondered what he was doing, maybe unpacking boxes, maybe thinking about the dinner too. She didn't know what would come of it, but she knew one thing for sure: she wanted to find out. That night, as she got into bed, she thought about how fast life could change. One knock on the door, one quiet conversation, one shared smile, and suddenly, the world didn't feel so empty anymore. She didn't know it yet, but the dinner she had planned wasn't just a friendly meal. It would become the start of something she hadn't expected, something that would test her heart and remind her that sometimes the best moments come when you stop planning for them. As the rain fell softly outside, Emma closed her eyes and whispered to herself. Tomorrow? The word carried hope, quiet and certain. She didn't realize it then. But tomorrow night wouldn't just be about food or conversation. It would be about rediscovering the courage to feel again. And while she believed she was the one doing the inviting, destiny had already made its own plans. The next evening arrived faster than Emma expected. The rain had stopped, leaving the streets washed clean, and a cool wind drifted through the open window as she finished setting the table. She kept everything simple: pasta with herbs, garlic bread, and a bottle of red wine she'd been saving for no special reason. Tonight suddenly felt like that reason. She wasn't trying to impress Daniel, but she wanted the evening to feel warm, welcoming. And real dot, as the clock neared 7, she caught herself checking the mirror for the third time. Her dark green sweater matched the season, and her hair fell naturally over her shoulders. She told herself it was just dinner with a neighbor, but her heart didn't seem to agree. Every small sound outside made her turn toward the door. Then came the knock. Daniel stood there holding a bottle of wine, his jacket damp from the drizzle. "I hope I'm not late," he said with an easy smile. "Right on time," Emma replied, stepping aside. "Come in." He looked around her home, now softly lit with candles and the gentle glow from the kitchen. "It smells amazing in here," he said. "I haven't had a home-cooked meal in a while." Emma smiled as she poured the wine. "Then, I hope I don't ruin your streak." They sat across from each other, and conversation flowed more easily than either expected. They talked about small things at first: his work designing homes, her life at the art gallery. He told her about growing up in Chicago, how he missed the sound of the trains at night. She shared stories about her grandmother teaching her to paint, and how that memory kept her going through her divorce. For a while, the air between them felt light. There was laughter, teasing, and the comfortable rhythm that comes when two people forget to guard their words. But under all that, there was something deeper, a quiet pull neither could name. Halfway through dinner, thunder rolled outside and the lights flickered. Emma quickly lit another candle, and the room glowed even warmer. The storm outside only made the moment more intimate. Daniel looked at her, his eyes soft in the candlelight. "You know," he said quietly, "this feels familiar, like I've been here before in another life." Emma didn't know what to say, so she just smiled. But inside, her heart skipped a beat. She hadn't felt this kind of calm connection in years. Not forced, not complicated, just there. They finished eating, and she poured more wine. The storm grew stronger, tapping against the windows, and for a moment, neither of them spoke. It wasn't an uncomfortable silence. Oh, it was the kind that lets you think about everything and nothing at once. Daniel looked down at his glass. "I wasn't sure I'd accept your invitation," he admitted. "I don't usually say yes to these things." "What made you change your mind?" Emma asked softly. He smiled faintly. "I don't know. Maybe the way you looked at me when I first knocked. It felt honest." Her breath caught, surprised by his sincerity. "That's rare," she said, her voice quieter than before. "It is," he agreed. Honesty's hard to find these days. Outside, lightning flashed. For a moment, his face was lit up in silver-like calm, kind, but shadowed by something he wasn't saying. Before Emma could ask, his phone buzzed on the table. He glanced at the screen, and all the ease in his expression vanished. "I'm sorry," he said quickly, standing up. "I have to take this." Emma nodded, trying to hide her disappointment as he stepped toward the hallway. His voice dropped low as he answered. She could hear fragments, words like, "Help, and I'll be there soon," but nothing clear. When he returned, his face looked heavier. "Is everything okay?" She asked carefully. He hesitated, then forced a small smile. "Just something I have to deal with." "I'm really sorry, Emma. Tonight's been wonderful, but I have to go." She tried to stay composed. "Of course. I understand." He paused at the door as thunder echoed again. "Thank you for dinner," he said softly. "I mean that." Before she could reply, he was gone. The door closed. And the silence that followed felt different now. Not peaceful, but empty. The rain grew louder, blurring the world outside. Emma stood still, staring at the 2 glasses on the table, one still half full. She didn't know what had just happened, but something inside her told her this wasn't just about a phone call. There was more to his story, something he wasn't ready to share. She cleaned up slowly, trying not to think about the way he had looked at her before he left, like he wanted to say something but couldn't. The storm outside had settled into a soft drizzle, and as she blew out the candles, a small ache filled her chest. She had just begun to open her heart again, just started to believe that maybe she could trust someone new. And now it felt like the moment had slipped through her fingers. Later, says she sat by the window with a cup of tea, staring at the faint light from Daniel's house. His curtains were drawn and everything was still. She wondered if he was okay, if he'd even think about her tonight. It had only been one dinner. Yet it felt like more like the beginning of something that had been cut short before it could grow. As the night deepened, she replayed every moment in her mind, the way he had smiled, how he'd listened when she spoke, the softness in his tone. None of it felt casual. None of it felt like a stranger's conversation. She didn't understand why he left so suddenly. But she couldn't shake the feeling that it wasn't goodbye. Before going to bed, she glanced once more at his darkened window. "You'll tell me someday," she whispered, though she didn't know if he could hear. Outside, the rain started again, soft and endless, like a song repeating its final note. Inside, Emma closed her eyes, the image of Daniel's troubled smile still vivid in her mind. She didn't know if he would come back or if that dinner would be their only memory. But deep down, beneath the confusion and quiet ache, she felt something she hadn't in years. The faint spark of hope that maybe, just maybe, this story wasn't over yet. And though she couldn't explain it, she knew she'd see him again. Life had a strange way of bringing the right people back when you least expected it. Days passed after that stormy dinner, and Daniel didn't come by again. At first, Emma told herself not to think about it. He had said he was dealing with something. Maybe work, maybe family, but silence has a way of growing louder with time. Every evening when she came home, she noticed his house next door. The lights were sometimes on, sometimes off, but she never saw him outside. The warmth of that one dinner had faded into unanswered questions. She tried to focus on work at the art gallery, but even there, his face would drift into her thoughts, his calm voice, his half smile, the sadness behind his eyes. She told herself it was silly. She barely knew him. Yet it wasn't just attraction. It was curiosity mixed with something deeper, empathy. There was something about Daniel that felt unfinished, like a story waiting to be told. One evening after work, Emma came home to find a plain white envelope slipped under her front door. Her name was written on it in careful handwriting she recognized instantly. Her heart skipped as she picked it up. She hesitated for a moment, wondering if she should open it right away. Then she sat on the couch, unfolded the paper, and began to read. "Emma, I owe you an apology. The night of our dinner, I got a call from my ex-wife. She's been struggling with her health, and I had to go help her. It wasn't fair to leave like that, but it was something I couldn't ignore. The truth is, I didn't expect that evening to mean as much as it did. You made me forget, even for a few hours, how heavy life had become. I wanted to thank you for that. I don't know if this is crossing a line, but I'd like to see you again, if you'll let me." Daniel Emma read the letter twice. It was short, honest, and quiet, just like him. The words weren't romantic in a loud way, but there was something real in them. She could feel his sincerity in every line. She leaned back against the couch, staring at the ceiling, the paper still trembling in her hands. For a long time, she sat there without moving. She thought about what he must have gone through, the guilt, the confusion, the pull between the past and the present. She knew what it felt like to be caught between moving on and looking back. Maybe that was why his sudden disappearance had hurt more than she expected, because she understood it too well. The next morning, she found herself glancing at his house as she left for work. The curtains were open this time, and she could see him sitting at a table by the window, coffee mug in hand, staring outside. For a second, she almost waved, but she hesitated. He looked lost in thought, and she didn't want to interrupt. Still, something inside her shifted. The space between them didn't feel as cold anymore. That evening, she came home and reread the letter again. Every time, it meant something slightly different. It wasn't an excuse. It was an explanation. And it made her realize how easily people assume silence means disinterest, when sometimes it just means pain. As the sun began to set, painting the sky in soft orange light, Emma made a decision. She went into the kitchen and began preparing dinner. Simple food again, pasta and bread, just like before. She set the table with 2 plates, 2 glasses, and a single candle. The room filled with the smell of herbs and something else, hope. When she was done, she took a deep breath and walked next door. Her hand hovered over the doorbell for a second before she finally pressed it. Daniel opened the door within moments, looking surprised. His eyes widened slightly when he saw her standing there with a gentle smile. "Emma," he said quietly. I didn't think she held up the letter and interrupted softly. "I read it twice." He looked uncertain. "I wasn't sure if I should send it. I didn't want to make things harder." "You didn't?" she said. "You made them clearer." There was a silence between them, but it wasn't uncomfortable. Then she added, "I made dinner again. And this time, I hope you'll stay." For a second, Daniel didn't move. Then a small smile tugged at the corner of his lips. "You're serious?" "Completely." He stepped aside. "Give me 5 minutes," he said. "I'll bring dessert." They both laughed, a soft, nervous laugh that made the moment lighter. Back at her place, the mood was different from the first time. The air felt warmer, more grounded. Daniel looked more relaxed, though his eyes still held traces of the past. As they ate, the conversation flowed easily again, though now there was a new honesty in it. He told her more about his life, about how his marriage had ended years ago. Not in anger, but in exhaustion. He had stayed friends with his ex-wife, but she had recently fallen sick, and he had stepped in to help her. "I didn't plan to disappear," he said quietly. "I just didn't know how to explain everything without it sounding messy." Emma listened without judgment. She understood. "Life is messy," she said softly. "We just pretend it's not." That made him smile. "You make it sound simple." "It's not," she replied. "But maybe it doesn't have to be complicated either." They talked for hours about mistakes, forgiveness, second chances, and the strange comfort of being seen by someone new. The candle burned low, and rain began again outside, tapping gently against the window's dot at one point. Daniel looked around the room and said, "You know, I don't think I've felt this calm in years." Emma met his gaze. "Then maybe you should stay a little longer." He didn't answer right away, but the look in his eyes said enough. Later, when he helped her clear the table, their hands brushed. It was a simple touch, but it carried more meaning than words could express. Neither pulled away. It wasn't a grand moment, no confessions, no promises, just quiet understanding. As Daniel was leaving, he turned back at the door. "Thank you," he said, "for giving me another chance." Kima smiled, the candlelight flickering behind her. Sometimes that's all we need. One more chance. When he left, the silence in the room didn't feel empty anymore. It felt full of possibilities, of something beginning again. Emma walked to the window, watching him cross the short path to his house, the rain catching in the glow of the streetlights. She realized then that her life had slowly begun to change, not because someone new had entered it, but because she had opened the door, and though she didn't know what would happen next, she knew this time, whatever came, she was ready. The evening arrived quietly, the kind of night where the city seemed to hold its breath. Emma stood in her kitchen, not worrying about perfect dishes or fancy presentation. Tonight wasn't about impressing anyone. It was about presence, being fully there with the person who had quietly become important to her. She chopped vegetables, stirred sauce, and hummed softly to herself, feeling a mix of nerves and excitement. It had been days since Daniel's letter, and tonight, she wasn't holding back. When the doorbell rang, she wiped her hands on a towel and opened the door to see Daniel, casual and relaxed, carrying a small bouquet of wildflowers. "I thought these might be better than dessert," he said with a shy smile. Emma laughed, taking them. "Perfect." They stepped inside together, and for the first time there was no pressure, no unspoken expectations hanging between them. The storm had passed, leaving the night crisp and clear. They moved around the kitchen like they had done this 100 times. Chopping, stirring, laughing, occasionally bumping into each other. It wasn't orchestrated or formal, it was easy, natural, and real. As they worked, conversation flowed effortlessly. Daniel talked about a project he had been planning for months, a small community center that combined art and architecture. Emma shared stories about artists she admired and the gallery's new exhibit coming up. Every story seemed to open a door, and they leaned in, listening with attention that felt rare and intimate. At one point, Daniel paused, holding a wooden spoon like a microphone. "You know, you said you had other plans that night we first met," he said, teasing gently. Emma raised an eyebrow. "I did. I was planning to keep my heart safe, not open it to anyone new." He laughed softly. Clearly, that didn't work. "Oh," she admitted, smiling. "It didn't." The truth of that moment hung between them, light and heavy at the same time. Neither needed to push further. The acknowledgement of shared vulnerability was enough. It was the first step in building trust, in allowing something fragile to grow. Dinner was ready soon after. They moved to the small table by the window, where candlelight flickered across their faces. Outside, the night was still, stars peeking through the clouds. Emma felt a calm settle over her as they ate, a sense of comfort that went deeper than any words. Afterward, they sat with coffee, leaning back in their chairs, letting the conversation drift into quieter corners of their lives. Daniel spoke about how he had been afraid to start over, afraid to meet someone who could truly understand him. Emma shared her fears too. The fear of being hurt again, of trusting too soon. But here, in the safety of their shared evening, those fears felt manageable. Their hands touched briefly on the table, brushing lightly. Neither pulled away. There was no rush, no pressure, only acknowledgement, the silent communication of two hearts testing the waters, discovering a rhythm they hadn't realized was missing. Daniel looked at her and said, softly but clearly, "I wasn't sure I was ready to feel again. But tonight, it feels like maybe I am." Emma's heart responded instinctively. "I didn't think I would either," she admitted. "But sometimes life surprises you." They spent hours talking, laughing, and even arguing gently over small things, like whether more salt was needed in the pasta or if the music was too loud. Every word, every gesture felt alive with the kind of energy that comes from genuine connection. The night wasn't perfect, but it was perfect for them. Later, as they cleared the table together, Daniel paused, looking out the window at the quiet street. "I used to think I needed to plan everything, control everything," he said. "But tonight, I feel like letting life happen is not so bad." Emma smiled, wiping her hands. "Sometimes the best moments are the ones we don't plan at all." He turned to her, and for a moment, there was no conversation, just a shared gaze. It was quiet, tender, and full of unspoken understanding. No grand confessions were needed, no promises. Just the acknowledgement that they were both present, both willing to let something new grow. Outside, the rain began softly again, gentle taps on the window like a lullaby. Inside, the warmth of the room, the laughter, the shared silence, and the simple touch of their hands made everything else fade away. Emma felt something she hadn't in years, a sense of belonging, being seen, of being understood without pretense. As the night deepened, Daniel stood at the door, holding his coat. "Thank you for tonight," he said simply. Emma smiled, the candlelight reflecting in her eyes. "Thank you for coming," she replied. He paused, then added, "I think this could be the start of something good. Something real." She nodded, feeling a calm certainty settle in her chest. "I think so too." When he finally left, she watched him walk down the short path to his house, the night quiet except for the soft rhythm of rain. She returned to the living room, picking up the remaining candle and sitting by the window. The warmth lingered, the scent of the meal still in the air. And for the first time in a long time, she didn't feel alone. She realized that life had a way of giving second chances, moments where timing, courage, and honesty converged. Tonight had been one of those moments. No dramatic gestures, no fireworks, just two people sharing a night, allowing their hearts to speak softly, and discovering that connection could exist even after heartbreak. Emma closed her eyes for a moment, taking in the quiet. She felt hope, not the naive kind, but the grounded, patient kind. She knew this was only the beginning, but it felt right. She didn't need other plans anymore. The plan was simple: be present, be honest, and see where life led them. And as the rain continued outside, gentle and steady, Emma smiled. The night had brought her what she hadn't realized she was searching for: a quiet, steady start, a chance at connection, and the soft thrill of something new blooming in her heart. This time, the evening didn't end with a goodbye that hurt. It ended with the promise of tomorrow, unspoken yet deeply understood. And for Emma, that promise was everything.